The year is 1676, and Agnes is a young novice living in the 13th century French abbey of Fontevraud. Life for her has been anything but easy. Her father died when she was just a baby, and her mother had to remarry so that they would and starve. And since it was only God who knew whether or not she was really the daughter of the dead man, when she was just 12 years old, she was sent to the abbey, where an aunt of hers was an abbess, to be raised as a nun. But Agnes hasn't been happy there at all. It's too quiet, and no one ever wants to talk to her. So she spends most of her time alone in the chapel praying. She hasn't always been so obedient, but she's hoping that if she can spend enough time praying, God will forgive her and make her mother love her again. But one day while she's praying, she hears a voice saying, "You are mine." She thinks it must be God calling her to do something great. And after some more prayer and consideration, she decides to fast until she receives a sign from God about what that great thing is. But as days turn into weeks, the other nuns worry that she might die. Will Agnes get the help that she needs before it's too late? Or will the secret beneath the floorboards take her life force as well? Hi, welcome to this house. Today, we are exploring the grounds of Fontevraud Abbey in France. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. In 1143, Henry I, Count of Anjou, wanted to construct a grand royal abbey in honor of his deceased second wife, Empress Matilda. He called upon architect and monk Louis Le Boutiller to design a magnificent structure for him. Construction began around 1143 and continued through several phases, with the last major construction ending around 1205. The buildings were laid out in the shape of a gigantic T, with the main building containing the choir, cloisters, and chapter house, surrounded by cells for the monks and nuns. The shorter perpendicular building contained a kitchen, dining hall, dormitory, refectory, and library. Connected to this building was the infirmary, which also had its own chapel. At the head of the complex was a courtyard with a fountain and a rose garden. But this layout was also intended to enforce the separation of the sexes, as the male and female sides only had one place where they could meet, through a central crossing in the middle of the church. Now, the royal abbey wasn't just meant to be a place of worship. It was also intended to function as a sort of upscale hotel. While the king and his court would often stay here, the complex also had apartments for visiting royalty. In fact, the entire eastern range of buildings adjacent to the church was reserved for guests. These lavish accommodations helped make Fontevraud one of the largest and most important religious complexes in Europe for nearly 200 years. But then everything changed during the French Revolution. In 1790, the National Assembly passed a law that dissolved the monastery and seized its assets. Eventually, the once glorious abbey became little more than a farm. Most of the buildings either collapsed due to neglect or were torn down for building materials. And today, only a small portion of the original structures remain. But our story takes place centuries earlier than the Revolution. In 1676, the nuns' quarters of the abbey looked much like the ruins we see today, though their roofs were intact. Now, despite being mostly empty, this part of the abbey was still used as a cemetery. And one particular nun was worried that her grave would soon join the growing pile of bones beneath the floorboards. Agnes was a young novice who had entered the abbey just 4 years prior at the age of 14. From the moment that she arrived, she felt unwanted. Her aunt, Mother Superior Parrot, rarely acknowledged her presence, and the other nuns seemed just as indifferent. Since she had no friends, she spent most of her time in the chapel praying to God for guidance. She prayed that he would show her what her purpose was, and that her mother would come to love her again. But day after day, nothing happened. So eventually she stopped praying and just started talking to God. She told him all of her secrets, hopes, and dreams. And slowly but surely, she began to feel closer to him. And then one day, while she was praying, she heard a voice say, "You are mine." She jumped, startled, and tried to look around to find the source of the voice, but she couldn't see anyone. "You are mine," it said again. This time, it seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. Maybe it was just her imagination, she thought, but the more time she spent in the chapel, the clearer the voice became. After much soul-searching, she decided that God was trying to tell her something. And so she fasted for 3 days without food or water. After 3 days, she began to feel faint, but the voice kept getting louder and louder. "You are mine," it beckoned. "You are mine." Finally, on the 3rd night, as Agnes collapsed onto the cold stone floor, she heard the voice say, "Rise." With trembling hands, she pushed herself up and walked to the nearest altar. As she stood there, the voice whispered, "Here I am," and a vision came over her. She saw herself standing in a beautiful white gown, holding a silver tray with a chalice on it. She saw herself walking down the aisle towards an ornate high altar where people were gathered, waiting for her. Suddenly, a tall, regal-looking woman stepped forward and took the chalice from her hands. Everyone knelt before her and shouted, "Long live the Queen!" Agnes awoke from her vision and fell to her knees. Could it be? Was God showing her that she was destined to become queen? But then the next day, she heard the voice again. "You are mine. You are mine." But this time, instead of feeling inspired, she was terrified. That night, she dreamed of the regal woman from her vision reaching out to her, but her long, sharp nails were covered in blood. She screamed in her sleep, and the other nuns rushed into her room, but she wouldn't wake up. They called for a priest who sprinkled her with holy water and recited prayers over her until finally she opened her eyes and sat up. "She has been saved," one of the nuns cried. But Mother Superior Perrette looked unconvinced. She knew that Agnes was obsessed with having visions, and she didn't want her to waste her life away with silly distractions. So she ordered that Agnes be given no food or water until she was better. And so Agnes fasted for another 18 days. As she grew weaker, the voices grew stronger, telling her that she was theirs, that she would be their vessel. The other nuns worried that she might die. Some begged Mother Superior to let them bring her food, but she refused, believing that Agnes was making the whole thing up for attention. Finally, on the 22nd day, Agnes collapsed. The nuns rushed to her side, but it was too late. She was dead. They carried her body to the chapel and laid her out on the altar. Then the next day, they buried her in the cemetery beneath the chapel floor. But many years later, when a new abbey was constructed and the cemetery was dug up, workers found her skeleton right where the vision had taken place. Some claimed that her bones looked like the shape of a chalice, while others swore that the skull looked like a woman's face. What did Agnes see in her vision? Was she destined to be a queen? Or was there something else lurking beneath the floorboards? Thank you all for watching. Which theory do you think? Let me know down below in the comments section. And while you're there, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. I would also like to say a special thank you to our supporters, whose names you can see on screen right now. If you would like to see your name on the screen and show the world your support for this channel, join our membership program today. I'll see you next time.